I want you to put yourself in a very specific moment in time. The morning of September 11, 2001. The unthinkable is happening. The Twin Towers are burning. The Pentagon just got hit.
Jumping right into the heavy stuff. We really are. The entire U.S. airspace is being totally shut down.
Exactly. So, if I ask you, where is the commander of America's most elite, highly classified counterterrorism force at this exact moment? What would you picture?
I'd assume he's in a bunker. Right? A subterranean war room in Washington or Fort Bragg. Surrounded by screens. Waiting to push the big red button.
Ready to unleash the absolute ultimate weapon. But here is a massive slap in the face. The commander of the Joint Special Operations Command JSOC is not in a war room. He's in Hungary.
Like, in Europe?
In Europe. And what is he doing while the actual world is literally on fire? He's writing a completely fake war game.
You have got to be kidding me.
A completely fictional exercise called Jackal Cave. A literal make-believe scenario. You have elite Delta Force guys running around the streets of Budapest in civilian clothes. Taking fake reconnaissance photos, outdoors. And you have generals giving solemn briefings to embassy staff about some imaginary crime syndicate with loose nukes. It's wild.
You expect the tip of the spear to be razor sharp. Ready to strike the second the nation is attacked. That's the whole point.
But they weren't. They were completely paralyzed. Caught totally flat-footed.
Wow.
And people assume it was just a crazy coincidence. Right? Bad timing. It wasn't. The real reason is 2 decades of military bureaucracy. Intense neglect. And a crazy internal rivalry that crippled the force. It's the ultimate institutional irony.
The very machine built to stop a terror attack is playing laser tag in Europe during the worst attack in history.
To understand how we got there, we're doing a deep dive today into an incredible book. 星号 Relentless Strike 星号 by Sean Naylor.
Naylor is a legend. He's an absolute masterclass investigative journalist. He was the first reporter to ever make special operations his exclusive beat. He spent decades in the dirt Somalia, the Balkans, Afghanistan, Iraq.
He even won a White House Correspondents' Award. Our mission today, built on his work, is to pull back the curtain. We want to show you how JSOC went from being a mistrusted, marginalized group of outcasts to a global, industrial-scale killing machine.
Exactly. But, wait a minute. As a listener, you're probably thinking, the US spends hundreds of billions on defense every single year. And we all know these Tier 1 units from the movies.
So how does a multi-billion-dollar military just leave its Ferrari parked in the garage on the biggest day in history? How does that happen?
To understand why they were stuck in the garage on 9/11, you have to look at the absolute disaster that forced the Pentagon to build that garage in the first place. Military bureaucracy doesn't change because someone has a good idea. It changes because of blood and intense, fiery public humiliation.
So we have to rewind.
We do. 1980, the most terrifying military apparatus in history wasn't born from genius. It was born from a total nightmare, Operation Eagle Claw.
April 1980. The U.S. is trying to rescue 52 American hostages in Iran. The embassy takeover.
President Jimmy Carter authorizes a military rescue. But they didn't have JSOC. They didn't have a unified command that trained for this. The mission was an ad hoc pickup game.
A pickup game with lives on the line?
A bureaucratic nightmare. The Army provides Delta Force and the Rangers. The Air Force flies the big transport planes. The Navy provides the aircraft carrier. And out of pure inter-service rivalry, the Marine Corps gets assigned to fly the Navy's helicopters. The Marines are flying Navy birds for an Army assault force. None of them train together. They don't even use the same radio frequencies.
A recipe for chaos. And chaos is exactly what they got.
They fly into a massive sandstorm in the Iranian desert. Helicopters break down. They meet at a spot called Desert 1 and realize they don't have enough working helicopters to do the mission. They have to abort. And then the unthinkable happens. In the pitch black, swirling sand, a Marine helicopter's rotor blades slice into an Air Force transport plane loaded with jet fuel. A massive fireball. 8 American servicemen are killed instantly. They had to leave the burning wreckage, the bodies, and classified documents right in the dirt. The next morning, the whole world sees it. Iranian officials parading charred American bodies on TV. Profound humiliation.
So, logically, the Pentagon sees this disaster and says, "We need a permanent, dedicated Special Ops Command immediately." Right?
You'd think so. The investigation certainly said that. But the conventional military establishment hated the idea.
Why? Why resist fixing the exact thing that just humiliated you on a global stage?
Money and power. The heads of the Navy and the Air Force were terrified a joint command would bypass their authority and steal their funding.
So it's like a massive legacy corporation where the CEO forces them to create a rogue startup internally. And all the old VPs are actively rooting for the startup to fail.
Actively rooting for it. When the order to create JSOC was finally forced through, the Navy and Air Force generals literally went purple with rage. A guy in the room said their blood pressure must have spiked 100 points. But they were trapped.
They had to eat it. So JSOC is born. The rogue startup incorporated in December 1980. But building a rogue startup means you're going to hire some pretty rogue personalities.
Oh, absolutely.
Which brings us to the Navy's response. The founder of this brand new maritime unit, Commander Richard Marcinko. Here's a statistic that just blew my mind. How does a tiny experimental unit of just 175 guys burn through more small arms ammunition in 1 year than the entire United States Marine Corps?
Because they had a blank check and a culture of absolute excess.
It's insane.
The Navy wanted a seat at the counterterrorism table. So they let Marcinko build a maritime version of Delta. He called it SEAL Team 6. But there were only 2 conventional SEAL teams. He named it Team 6 purely to play mind games with Soviet intelligence, making them think there were more teams.
That is brilliant. But also incredibly arrogant.
That was Marcinko. And his culture was the exact opposite of Delta Force. Delta relied on grueling formal psychological filtering, a 40-mile hike alone in the mountains with a heavy rucksack. No drill instructors yelling. Just total isolation to see if you break. They wanted quiet, mature professionals.
And Marcinko's guys?
Marcinko handpicked his guys in bars. He openly said, "I use booze as a tool." He wanted to see how guys handled themselves when they were hammered. Did they get aggressive? Did they back down? It was essentially a heavily armed frat house with black budget money. They even bought a disused cargo ship just to have a private playground.
You hear SEAL Team 6 today, and you think of ultimate quiet precision, the guys who got Bin Laden. But it started as this chaotic blank check party.
Totally. The first JSOC commander, an army general, absolutely despised them. He went to a SEAL promotion party once where Marcinko bragged about using government funds to fly in live Maine lobsters. The operators were so drunk they couldn't stand up. The general tried to get Marcinko fired. But the Navy protected him. The lack of oversight wasn't a bug. It was a feature.
But that arrogance, that lack of discipline, it had to catch up with them.
It did. In the worst way possible. Central America. 1989, Operation Just Cause in Panama. The U.S. invades to oust dictator Manuel Noriega. History views it as a quick success. But for the elite Navy operators, it became a complete tactical nightmare at Paitilla Airport.
Walk me through what happened there.
SEAL Team 4 was tasked with disabling Noriega's personal jet so he couldn't escape. It's a pretty standard objective. But taking an airfield is a land warfare mission. That's what Army Rangers do. For political reasons. The Navy demanded the SEALs get the job. And they threw away their tactical advantage completely. Instead of sneaking in from the water or using a sniper to shoot the engines. They lined up and walked straight across the flat. Open tarmac silhouetted against the airfield lights. Then the radios failed. The Panamanian guards just opened up with heavy machine guns. It was a slaughter. 4 SEALs were killed right there. 8 others severely wounded. The fallout left a toxic stain on the SEALs for a decade. The JSOC generals, mostly Army guys, looked at that and said the Navy was fundamentally inept at land warfare. So for the next 10 years, whenever a major mission came up, JSOC sidelined the SEALs and sent Delta Force.
So you have this intense tribalism rotting them from the inside. But what's crazy is the conventional generals still hated all of them. Which explains why JSOC basically sat out the biggest war of the decade, Operation Desert Storm.
1991, the Gulf War.
Let me play devil's advocate. JSOC, the ultimate Ferrari, is parked in the garage by General Norman Schwarzkopf. If I'm Schwarzkopf, managing 500,000 guys and massive tank columns, I'd be terrified of Soviet rogue commandos running around the desert starting World War III by accident. Was he really wrong to bench them?
From his conventional perspective, his fear was totally rational. Schwarzkopf despised elite independent units. He didn't trust JSOC at all. He literally took Delta Force, the most highly trained assaulters on Earth, and assigned them to be his personal VIP bodyguards in Riyadh.
A total misuse of the asset. Like having a world-class hacker on your IT team. And the CEO makes him unjam the office printers while the company gets hit by ransomware.
JSOC was begging to fight. They wanted to rescue Americans in Kuwait City. But Schwarzkopf said no. It took a massive strategic crisis to force his hand. The Scud missiles. Saddam realized he couldn't beat the US head-on. So he started launching mobile Scuds into Israel. The terror in Washington was that if Israel retaliated, the whole Arab coalition would fracture. The war effort would collapse overnight.
But couldn't conventional bomber jets just find the missiles?
No. Because they were mobile. They'd drive out into the desert at night, launch, and hide under camouflage netting before jets could even get there. Conventional tactics were failing.
So they finally unleashed the Ferrari.
Defense Secretary Cheney and Colin Powell pulled rank and ordered JSOC into the fight. A 400-man task force drops deep into the western desert. They rewrite the rules. Delta operators embed themselves in shallow dirt holes, hide sites for days, freezing at night, watching highways. When they spot a Scud convoy, they paint it with a laser designator for jets or light it up themselves with heavy weapons. It worked. Once JSOC hit the ground, Scud launches into Israel plummeted by 80%. They literally kept Israel out of the war.
Wow. So they absolutely proved their worth. But the military is fickle. Because just 2 years later, JSOC gets total control in an African city. And the fallout from that changes American foreign policy forever. We have to talk about the blood of Mogadishu, Somalia. October 1993. Operation Gothic Serpent. 18 dead Americans. 2 Black Hawk helicopters shot down in labyrinthine city streets. Made famous by 星号 Black Hawk down 星号. Was Mogadishu a heroic tactical victory or the ultimate strategic disaster?
It depends on your proximity to the gunfire. The operators on the ground Task Force Ranger, Delta Force. The pilots, they saw it as a hard-fought tactical victory. They were vastly outnumbered by thousands of armed militia in a hostile city. When the helicopters went down, it turned into a rescue disaster. But they fought through it, inflicted hundreds of casualties, and survived until a relief column arrived. They held their ground against impossible odds. But Washington didn't see a masterclass in survival. Washington only saw horrific images on CNN. Dead American soldiers being dragged through the streets by mobs. President Clinton panicked and ordered a total withdrawal. The warlord, aided, was left in power. But here's the real slap in the face. Sitting hundreds of miles away in Sudan, watching this exact broadcast, was a relatively unknown financier named Osama bin Laden. He took notes. His takeaway? He told his followers, "America runs."
That is chilling. That single takeaway shaped modern history.
The trauma of Mogadishu infected JSOC and Washington with extreme, paralyzing risk aversion. JSOC went from being a precision scalpel to a massive political liability. Nobody wanted another Mogadishu.
Which perfectly explains this bizarre era in the late 90s. JSOC morphed into a bloated, paranoid bureaucracy, searching for relevance without risk. They started hunting war criminals in the Balkans.
It was necessary. And the operators developed amazing techniques. They couldn't just kick down doors in a peacekeeping zone. So they created the brown cell. They put huge Delta and SEAL operators in civilian clothes and sent them undercover. They'd team up male and female operators to look like married couples on vacation. They'd sit in cafes drinking espresso, tracking the daily habits of war criminals. By 1998, they caught 7 out of 12 major targets.
The intel was brilliant. But the way the generals executed the arrests was insane. Why deploy hundreds of guys? Multi-million-dollar task forces and helicopters, just to arrest a single old man buying bread on a Tuesday?
The Mogadishu hangover. The JSOC commander, a 2-star general, would fly all the way from the US to Europe just to sit in a tent and personally oversee a 4-man snatch operation. A 2-star general flying out for 4 guys in a van. The definition of micromanagement. The operators were furious. They knew 4 guys with pistols could do it quietly. But the general had to be there as a political buffer. Protecting them from Washington bureaucrats terrified a young officer might cause an international incident. A toxic, zero-defect culture.
So they built a flawless sniper rifle, but attached a 500-pound weight to the trigger so no one could pull it. That is the exact machine that existed on the morning of September 11th. 2001.
Which brings us back to our hook in Hungary.
The towers fall. Donald Rumsfeld, the defense secretary, is demanding vengeance. He wants options to strike Al-Qaeda immediately. He's telling them, "Give me a 50% solution. Don't wait for 100%. And what is JSOC? The tip of the spear. Pitching Rumsfeld? Let's attack a fertilizer plant. Objective Gecko.
Unbelievable. General Daly pitched an elaborately staged raid on a facility that basic intel already showed was probably just an empty fertilizer plant. They were stuck in a 1990s mindset, high rehearsal, zero risk. Rumsfeld was furious. He told them, "If I wanted a D-Day invasion, I'd call the 82nd Airborne. Give me something small and fast."
But Rumsfeld is impatient. He wants to show the public we're fighting back. So JSC, to appease him, launches massive, bloated airborne raids deep into Afghanistan. Objectives Rhino and Gecko. October 2001. Almost 200 Rangers parachuting in the dark onto a dirt airstrip. A massive flex. But here's the kicker. And this made my blood boil. They knew the targets were largely empty before the planes even took off.
It was a PR stunt. General Daly thought filming these massive raids would break Taliban morale. They literally brought combat camera crews. They broadcast the night vision footage globally that afternoon. But the operators on the ground were irate. A Delta officer called it giving the enemy a free look at our playbook. Real American blood was spilled for that TV show. 2 Rangers, John Edmonds and Christopher Stonecipher, died when their helicopter rolled over in a massive dust cloud of brownout at a staging area.
Explain the mechanics of that.
It's not just a dusty day. It's aerodynamic chaos. when a massive Black Hawk hovers low over fine desert sand. The rotors kick up a blinding cloud. The pilot completely loses the horizon and gets spatial disorientation. The engine sucks in the sand. The pilot gets vertigo. The helicopter drifts. A wheel catches the dirt. And this multi-ton machine just violently rolls into the ground.
And those two young men died just trying to stage for an empty photo op. The institutional memory completely failed them. And this obsession with playing it safe, with staging spectacles, cost them the ultimate prize just weeks later. The Ghost of Tora Bora. Winter 2001. This has to be the biggest strategic blunder of the century. By December, the CIA and small spec ops teams had Osama bin Laden cornered in the White Mountains. Tora Bora. A rugged, freezing cave complex. We had him. Put yourself in the boots of a Delta commander. Dalton Fury.